Shele babo, shele babo, how como les shele babo, shele babo, como les shele babo, shele babo, shele babo, where my man, where my man, where my man. Shele babo, shele babo, shele babo, music on.
Don't need the background cleared or the Spider-Man helmet.
No. Just relax. So I'm with my good friend Jackie. We knew each other in Brackpan High. I remember a party of yours, Jackie, and I have to confess, this is the time for me to confess, we stole your dad's booze.
We stole my dad's booze and somebody smashed the light on the stoop. But I wouldn't have known. I was just there. It was probably my sister's party as opposed to my party. But
so I do have that memory. But now you were born in Scotland, is that true?
Correct. In Glasgow. Well, Paisley, but grew up in Glasgow till I was 8.
And your story sort of matches mine, that your dad got a job with the TV industry, wasn't it?
Well, he came out because South Africa didn't have TV, and he had hoped to make his fortune when South Africa did get TV, which was supposed to have been the next year. And it didn't happen for 3 or 4 or 5 years. So, but he was an electrician by trade, so he got a job within a week of landing there. Yeah.
And do you remember the time in Scotland before you left?
Very much so. We had those, and my father was one of those guys that has everything new that comes on the market, he had to have it. So we had 8mm movies to look back on every Christmas we'd ever had, and you know, the odd holiday at the beach with your plastic sandals on the stones, and so those were things that I suppose prompted our memories, you know, coming across here on the Edinburgh Castle as opposed to flying, because my father said it would be probably the last holiday we would get for a long time.
And it was about a 3-week trip, was it?
10 days, I think.
From Southampton? Or?
Yeah, from Southampton on the Edinburgh Castle, landing in Cape Town. I think it was a train up to Pretoria.
Yeah.
And we stayed in Hillbrow at the Peacehaven Hotel.
Wow.
That's what I remember. And I think we were there for about 3 weeks.
Do you remember your first glimpse of Africa? I know with mine, I was down in the cabin and Mum came and said, quick, come out, look at this. And I got up to the deck and there were all these Africans unloading on the wharf, and they had big arms and they were sweating and they wore balaclavas. I've never seen anyone wear a balaclava.
I have no recollection of that at all. Nothing.
And how did you get to Hillbrow from Cape Town? Train?
I think we must have gone by train. Again, I don't have a recollection of that, but we must have. I remember though we were in the Peacehaven Hotel. That I remember. The name of the hotel, right stuck, I don't know.
And so your dad was waiting to be sent to Brackpan or get a job, and it happened to be in Brackpan, or you lived somewhere first?
No, he the job he was supposed to have had lined up, I think it was at Scottish Cables or something. When he got here, it had fallen through. But he found something else quite quickly, and then he read the Star Classified and found a house to rent on a 2-year contract for 200 Rand a month, fully furnished, in Brackpan.
Right.
So he caught the train to Brackpan, had a look at the house, and decided this was the easiest way. He didn't have to go out and buy furniture, and he would have a house for 2 years while he could save to sort of set himself up after, which is exactly what he did. And the house we got was from Mr. McCallum, who was a mine manager on one of the mines, and he'd been transferred to another mine, but for 2 years, so he didn't want to sell or leave his house standing for 2 years. And the house I think he was going to probably was furnished, so he left it there. And I don't know if you ever had Nona van Heerden as a teacher at Brackpan High.
Yeah.
That was his daughter. Mr. McCallum's daughter was Nona van Heerden, who taught maths at Brackpan High many years later. So we rented his house for 2 years.
And you had, what, 2 younger sisters or one?
Two younger sisters.
So you were the oldest?
I was the oldest by
And one was what, about 6 or something?
One is a year younger than, 11 months younger than me. So she was 7, and then the little one was 3. My little sister was 3.
What did your mum do?
My mother was a hairdresser.
Okay.
So by trade, her mother owned a couple of shops in Glasgow. How would you say? A woman before her time. Back then, she waited till she was 36 before she got married. Then she had 2 children.
Wow.
Her husband stayed home and looked after the children.
For those
It was
days?
late for those days.
Yeah.
And she owned businesses. She owned a hairdresser's and a cafe that sold sort of pie and peas. So my mother left school to be trained as a hairdresser and worked for her mother in a place called Govan in Scotland, which was where all the shipyards were. So that's where they grew up, and that's where she had her businesses, my granny. Okay. And you couldn't believe it, she ran the businesses, but she couldn't get a loan because she was a woman. And she couldn't own a house because her husband wouldn't sign.
Wow.
And if he wouldn't sign, she wasn't allowed to sign because she was a woman. So, yeah.
Thank goodness times have changed.
Well, that's it. We don't realise, because we have it all, we don't realise how hard other women have fought for it, in the past.
So, did you go to Brenthurst?
Yes, and that was one of the conditions that my father, when he bought a house or rented a house, was that we would have to be within walking distance of a school, because my mother didn't drive.
Sure.
So initially she stayed at home, and so we got Brenthurst school uniforms.
And what year are we talking about, Jackie? 70?
71.
71.
70, 71. I think it was
about the
71.
same time.
Standard 2. And we got here in the sort of May, June, and the third term was starting in July, and Brenthurst was changing its school uniform from the blue dots to the ones that they've got now, which is sort of white with maroon, with the maroon stripes.
Right.
So the school said, don't buy a uniform because it'd be a waste.
Right.
And they kitted us out from the second-hand or the last property store at the school. So my first 2 terms at Brenthurst was in second-hand school clothing, which embarrassed me no end. But I had new school shoes.
Was it a hard transition?
Dress. For me, I think it was, because I was extremely shy. I didn't want to come. I don't like change. But I wasn't allowed to stay with my aunt. I was told, you're coming. Obviously at 8 you don't really get much of a choice. But so I was always shy. So I suppose, but you get over things,
Yeah.
I didn't hanker, I didn't have anybody special there.
How did you go with learning Afrikaans?
Badly.
Yeah, me too.
They obviously standard 2, they started sending me to extra Afrikaans lessons with one of the ladies in Lapping Road, one of the teachers gave, and I used to go with Susie Hendrickson, who was another immigrant from Sweden.
Right.
And she stayed down the road from me. And we went to Afrikaans lessons together.
And was it in Brenthurst you started playing soccer?
No, there was no soccer for girls back in the 70s. I played netball because that was the sport that girls got to play. And my father had told them that if there's something like acrobatics, because I did acrobatics back in Scotland and trampolining, that they must put my name forward, because he said I would never put my own hand up. So when they announced on that tannoid that the gym teacher or the gym class was looking for more people, Mrs. I think it was Castelling at the time, told Hazel McLean, who was in the gymnastics team, to take me down to the gym to sign me up.
Right.
And Hazel will tell you to this day, because I'm still mates with Hazel today, that she's been my best friend for the longest, because she took me to that first gym class and I signed up for gymnastics.
Yeah.
So I did gymnastics and netball at school.
And then we get to Brackpan High. We're in candy striped blazers with black, red and white, maybe?
Yeah.
Is that where you started soccer?
Well, went in standard 6, and my father was very involved in the Brackpan Scottish Society, which was quite a strong society at the time. And one of his good friends, Mr. Dave Blues, he had a couple of sons, and Nan Blues was his daughter.
Oh, I know the name Nan.
Nan Blues, good friends with Agnes's friend, And so they persuaded the Blackburn Scottish Society to start up a soccer team so that the boys could play. And Gavin Duffy and Dimitri Tomazos and the older blues boys, they formed a soccer team and they called it the Blackburn Scottish Soccer Team. So the Scottish Society sponsored them their kits. And shortly after that, they persuaded Mr. Israel of Blackburn Motors to sponsor them. And the Nomad, which I think was a Chev, had just come out, and they changed their name to the Blackburn Nomads. So I used to go with my dad to soccer with Blackburn Scottish, wishing to play but weren't allowed to. And there was an article in the Sunday Times, and the Sunday Times came with that pull-out magazine.
Yeah.
And the headline was "Well Scored Honey," and there was a picture of Bernadette Wall, the number 5 from Parkhurst Soccer, on it. And that's when I found out, or we found out, that there was women's football in South Africa.
Right.
Not that I played in Scotland, because there I just played with the boys in the street.
Yeah.
And then my father and Mr. Blues started a women's football team, so as I could play soccer
In Blackburn.
in Blackburn.
And you were about 14
Blackburn.
or 15? Or?
Standard 7, so I was 13, yeah.
Okay.
13, 14. So that was me. Then all your dreams are true. You're allowed to play soccer. You're not just watching Gavin Duffy and the boys playing on a Saturday afternoon. You could play on a Sunday, because back then the fields, women weren't allowed to play on a Saturday because the fields were reserved for men, and nobody played on a Sunday. Obviously, remember South Africa, quite religious, everything closed on a Sunday, but because the fields weren't being used, the girls were allowed to play on a Sunday afternoon.
What were you, a striker or?
I started as a wing,
Yeah.
and I finished as a centre back many years later.
So you're quite fast on your legs, are you?
I could run.
Okay.
I could run.
So let's go to when you've left school. You matriculated, have you?
Yeah.
And what was your first job, or what were you thinking of doing?
Well, I went to Wits University and studied a BCom in accounting,
Business, commercial?
a Bachelor of Commerce.
Oh, commerce, sorry.
Bachelor of Commerce, because accounting was, a strong subject at school. I found it easy, so always take the path of least resistance.
Of course.
And I did that. I went to Wits and studied a BCom. Should have been a 3-year degree, but I laughed on the orientation week. The guy sat us in one of those big 300 people lecture halls and said, look at the person on your right and look at the person on your left. Only one of you is going to pass this course. Only one of you is going to get your degree in 3 years' time. And he was correct. It had a
Now, Wits is in Pretoria, is it? Or
Johannesburg.
Johannesburg.
University of the Witwatersrand. I think it was the first university in South Africa. I'm not sure though.
Right.
But Wits, because the mining people got together way back in the day.
And would that have been a time you left home for the first time?
No, don't be daft. Don't be daft when the rent's for free and the cleaning's for free and the laundry's
Still
done.
at home, yeah.
I stayed at home. I was at university. I failed a year, so my 3-year degree took me 4 years.
How did you get from Blackburn to Wits every day?
On the train.
On the train.
On the train from the Blackburn or the Scarpenswil station. But I was quite lucky. My dad worked in Joburg, so he used to generally drop me off in the morning, and I used to just catch the train home
Okay.
at lunchtime, walk from Wits to the station and catch
Now
the train.
you got your degree, and you start looking for a job as an accountant, or
Well, when I was doing my degree, I sort of found out there was something called a chartered accountant.
Right.
So just it seemed to be the natural progression that if you do your BCom, you go on and become a CA.
Right.
And back then there was a shortage of people who wanted to be CAs because you had to do a 3-year articles.
Right.
So I was very lucky. The university,
Were
the
there
companies.
many women doing it?
No, I was one of the first 200 in the country.
Wow.
So there wasn't that many, because when I was qualified, they kept on repeating there's less than 200 sort of blacks and women. So in that 200 were the first sort of blacks and Indian type people and women being CAs back in the day. And I don't know, that required that you signed articles, but because there wasn't that many people keen, the accounting firms came on the Varsity campus and interviewed you in August before your final exams.